I bought this old Parker shotgun at a local gun show, 150 bucks, a true project gun, any way you think of it. I bought it specifically for the purpose of restoring it. But the purpose for the restoring was just so that we could teach all the different aspects of bringing an old shotgun made in the late 1870s back to serviceable condition, back to where it looks just like new. So that was the concept behind it. Looking the gun over, obviously sometime in its early life the stock was broken, so maybe someone fell on it or whatever. And I have described the stock as something that Grandpa made, and it was the first stock Grandpa ever made, built out of a 2x4 or something like that. So some fairly inexpensive welding work done on the trigger plate to get the whole thing back together, and then Grandpa restocked it, and apparently there was some type of a serviceability to it when he finished with it. So as we look at the gun and we think, okay, where in the world do you start? You always think lock, stock, and barrel on any kind of a gun. You know, what work do you have to do to the lock, the receiver? What work do you have to do to the stock, the stocks, the butt stock, and the fore end? And then what work do you have to do to the barrels? So when you break it down like that, you think, okay, I got to work on the lock, the stock, and the barrel. It makes it a little bit easier to digest in terms of how much work there is, but you really have to restore the action mechanism itself, and then, of course, polish it and make it new again. You have to put brand new stocks on it and finish them and checker them the way they were originally. And then you have to address the barrels, which were loose. You have to tighten up the barrels. You have to refinish them, polish out the insides, rechamber them. So it's a very, very big project. So while we've done all this work here at Midway, let me make it clear that we do not offer this work as a service. But if you were to send this gun, a gun similar to this, out to a professional gunsmith to do this type of restoration work, to replace the stocks on it, to rebuild the lock, to rebuild the barrels, probably you'd wind up with $4,000 or $5,000 in it. So you would never necessarily think about that being a good value proposition. If the gun was in the family and had a family history and you wanted to restore it back to the way it was when Grandpa bought it, you might be interested in spending a lot of money on it. Otherwise, it's just a labor of love and something that you can teach with. Anytime you're going to restore any old gun, the first thing you got to do is you got to disassemble it and do an inspection. And so when you do that disassembly, you're looking on the inside of the gun, you're looking at screws and pins and parts, and you're beginning to understand what's broken and how the gun has been used and abused through the years. So some of the stuff we could see from the outside, but on the inside you got 100 years of gunk. But you can begin to understand what it is that you're going to have to do and really the scope of the project. Probably the most significant, the trigger plate, of course, had been broken when the stock was broken, and it had been kind of brazed back together. So we had to repair that. So you have to cut out the old braze, refixture it up, and we used TIG welding then, and we welded the trigger plate back together. And then, of course, you've got to file out all the extra weld. But we were able to do all that, and all those parts came out really just like new. Looking then to work on the receiver was color case hardened originally when it left the factory. So in order to polish it, you really have to anneal it. So the annealing process is pretty simple. You just you basically heat it up and cool it down slowly on a controlled basis, and now it is soft steel that you can get a file on, and then you can polish it out. So polishing out the receiver is a very important piece of restoring, and it's a lot of hard work to polish metal, a whole lot much more difficult than what it is to polish out a piece of wood. So once you've got it cleaned, inspected, the small parts built back up, the receiver annealed, the receiver polished, then you're ready to do what we call the color case hardening project, and that's pretty neat in and of itself. It's really basic. You just have to pack the receiver and the locks, the other parts that you want to color case harden, into basically a charcoal vat, get it in the oven, heat it up, hold it, and then cool it very quickly by quenching in water. And you get the surface hardened, which is what you wanted, but you also get more carbon into the surface from the charcoal, and the byproduct of all that is what we call the color, called color case hardening, and you can see the beautiful colors, and that's something that all shotgun aficionados are interested in. After everything is polished up, we needed to put the word Parker Brothers back on the locks. Very, very small amount of engraving. It's very detailed, so we simply did a tracing of the word Parker Brothers on an original gun, copied that over onto the locks, and then we were able to cut those very few strokes that it takes to say Parker Brothers on the side of the locks. And that's just something that you'd want to do to make it look like it was when Grandpa bought it. Restocking an old Parker shotgun is it's quite a job, and when you consider where we started, that is, Grandpa had restocked this gun, and but typically you might take the original stock off of a gun and have that stock duplicated, and then you get all the inletting around the receiver very, very close to original. But we didn't have that capability because the inletting wasn't very close along the receiver, and the stock didn't have very, very good dimensions. So what we did is we had a stock made from a 10-gauge pistol grip pattern. So it was a 10-gauge stock with a pistol grip on it, and we're going to put it on a 12-gauge gun with a straight grip. Nothing wrong with that. The tangs are the same, so you just have extra wood on the outside. And then ultimately we had to, once we got it all fitted up, we had to take the pistol grip off and inlet the trigger guard tang into it. One of the things that I think that most folks find intriguing is the actual fitting of the stock and the locks to the receiver. So you take the locks off, and the first thing you're trying to do is, of course, fit the stock up. You're trying to fit it up on the tangs, but the stock has to fit very neatly and very closely against the receiver, because when the gun goes off, it is that fit that keeps the stock from breaking. So you've got to have a good tight fit of the inletting against the receiver. Once you've got that done, obviously you have lots of extra wood, but you have to set the locks in. And an amateur on a first-time basis would not understand the need to strip the lock plates, because if you've got all this extra apparatus on them, the locking mechanism on the inside makes it a whole lot more difficult. So the first thing you do is you fit the stripped lock plates to the stock, and you get the perfect look that you're looking for and the perfect fit. Then you assemble the locks again, and now you're fitting all of the locking mechanism itself into the stock without taking off any more than what you have to do it. So that's something I think is intriguing to most people, is how you actually fit the locks to the stock. But once you get the stock on and you get it all dressed down and you get it all pointed up, you've got a very attractive thing. Fitting the butt plate is an interesting thing, because you got a radius surface here. So using a sanding wheel to get that the way you want, and of course you got to fit in the widow's peak here. Very interesting. And then of course you've got to shape that stock to where it looks the way you want it to look from what the original stocks would look like. The fore-end is another project, a little bit easier, but when you get the fore-end iron all fit up, then you still have to put the wedge plates in. And that's a pretty interesting thing, to put those wedge plates in without chipping it out, and then to put the little fore-end tip here. So that's a big, big project in itself, just fitting the stocks, taking off all the excess wood, getting the trigger guard in, the butt plate, all the accessories on, getting it to look like it did when I left the factory. Now, you have to sand it, you have to seal it, you have to fill the grain, you have to finish it, polish it all out nice, and you're still not finished. Now you have to checker it. And if you notice this checkering, it's what they call flat top checkering. So this is period for the 1870s. So the actual checkering itself is cut with a tool that's got parallel sides on it, and it just got cutting teeth on the end. So it's not a V tool that would create diamonds that are pointed on the top. It's a flat tool that you have to be very careful with, but you want the tops of the diamonds to all be flat, so they look like diamonds from the distance, but when you get close to them, they have flat tops, so the little troughs running down between them are just parallel sides. So you get something that's very, very attractive. You get something that's authentic for the period, and that's called flat top checkering. On most old shotguns, like this Parker, there's lots and lots of deferred maintenance, if you would, on the barrels. This particular gun, some people might describe it as a loose action. Some people might say it's loose barrels. We normally think of the barrels being joined to the receiver, and when the barrels get loose, then they need to be rejoined. So certainly the barrels were loose on the receiver on this gun, and that's one of the things we had to do was rejoin them. That's a very interesting project, but a very straightforward thing to do. The barrels were dented, so we had to raise the dents. The rib was loose, so we had to take the rib off and clean that all up and relay the rib, resolder the rib. Lots of rust and corrosion pits on the outside of the barrels that all had to be polished out in order to do the finishing process on them. Inside the barrels, of course, the chambers were short, so we wanted to open the chambers up a little bit. The bores were rough. We had to ream the bores out. We wanted to redo the chokes in it to make the chokes a little bit more open. So inside was chokes, polishing out and rechambering. Outside then was dents and the rib and polishing. And you can see these are Damascus barrels, or actually they're twist barrels, twist steel barrels. But you can see what we came up with the final process. So lots and lots of labor, lots and lots of love go into taking a set of barrels on an old worn-out shotgun, if you would, and restoring the gun in terms of the fit and function to new and the appearance to new at the same time.